Welcome to Study Live. We are seeing the chapter The Living World, and in this session we are going to have a brief introduction on the topic The Living World. When we look at our planet Earth, what we can see is it is inhabiting a variety of biotech and abiotic components. So it has got both non-living as well as living components which are present. So we can say that our planet Earth has both biotech as well as abiotic. It has biotech as well as abiotic organisms, or biotech as well as abiotic components. These biotic components are the living organisms and the abiotic components are the non-living organisms which are present. So when we say biotech means they are the living organisms. And when we say abiotic, they are the non-living organisms, the ones which are non-living organisms. So have you ever thought what is the criteria how we can say a particular organism is living and a particular organism is non-living? Yes, there is definitely an answer to this. There are characteristics which are going to differentiate the organisms which are living and which are not living. Let us look at those characteristic features and try to understand what is the process which is going to differentiate these living organisms from these non-living. So first thing is, as the characteristics of living organisms, we will say the characteristics of living organisms. So from birth, when an organism is born, suppose an organism is born, when the organism is born, it has to survive. So for surviving, it requires a variety of metabolic reactions to take place in the body. For the survival of the organisms, a variety of metabolic reactions are required. Now these metabolic reactions which are required, they are produced to obtain energy, which is ATP. So these metabolic reactions which are taking place in the body of the organism, they are classified into two different types. They can be catabolic reactions or they can be anabolic reactions. So when we say this word catabolic, it means it is the breakdown of large molecules into simple ones. And when we say anabolic reactions, it is the formation of complex substances from these simple substances. So catabolic means over here breakdown of these complex molecules. There is breakdown of complex molecules. So this breakdown of complex molecules is called as catabolic. And when we say the word anabolic, it is the formation of molecules from simple substances. So this catabolic and this anabolic reaction takes place in the body of the organism, and which is together known as metabolism. So this is the first characteristic feature which takes place in living organisms, that is metabolic activities or metabolic reaction, and they are sum totally called as metabolism. Now as the organism is born, now it has to survive, and with the time it shows the properties such as growth and development. So our second point is the living organisms show growth and development. They show growth and development. Now let us focus on this word, growth and development process. Now this growth and development process is a well orchestrated process Well orchestrated process means it is going to be a proper step-by-step process, which means that here the organism will not show sudden growth. The growth is going to be slow, and it is going to take a little step-by-step growth, and eventually the organism will grow. If I ask you a question, have you seen sand moles and boulders which are present near the seashore, or a rock which is passing down a mountain? You will say it is going to grow in size. But yes, that is not living. That is not living because the growth is taking place from outside. Whereas in living organism, the growth has to take place from inside. New materials are added from outside. Is extrinsic growth. When new materials are added from outside, the growth is called as intrinsic. Extrinsic. When new materials are added from outside. So this is not growth. These new materials, when they are added from outside, this kind of growth is called as extrinsic growth, and this is taking place in non-living organisms. So this is not a characteristic feature of growth. This is not saying that it is living, because your new materials are getting added from outside. Whereas in living organisms, the growth which is present is intrinsic growth. Because new cellular materials are getting added from inside. So that growth is called as intrinsic growth, and that is the characteristic feature of living organisms. So if we say that rolling stone down the mountain, is it living? The answer is no, it is not living, because it is showing extrinsic growth. Now the third characteristic feature. Now after the organism shows growth, the growth is going to be for a fixed lifespan. It is not going to show unlimited growth, or it is not going to show exponential growth. The growth process has to take place for a limited time duration, and after that the body stops its normal growth and the time begins for which is called as aging. So aging process starts. So the third, the organism shows growth for a limited lifespan. Limited lifespan. So we will say here the living organisms, the ones which are living, the living organism, they show limited growth, after which the process stops, and the living organism starts aging. The process of aging starts. Now, before this process of this birth and this aging, we living organisms want to continue our race, or we want to continue our species. So living organisms tend to reproduce. So our next point is going to be living organisms reproduce to form young ones which are similar to themselves. This process is known as reproduction, by the process known as reproduction. So this process of reproduction is only seen by living organism. We cannot say a stone has reproduced and this is its daughter stone. We cannot say that, because that is a non-living organism. So living organism, they reproduce and they produce young ones which are similar to themselves. Now in this process of reproduction, this reproduction can be asexual, which is involving one parent, or it can be sexual, wherein two parents are involved, one male and one female. So the process can be asexual or it can be sexual. So living organisms reproduce by these two methods. Now you have to remember exception. We have exception of a mule, which is a hybrid formed by a donkey and a horse, and worker bee. Worker bee. They are living but they do not reproduce. But do not reproduce because they are sterile organisms, because they cannot reproduce. So living organisms, they tend to reproduce, except for this mule and worker bee. They cannot reproduce because they are sterile. Now next, after this, we can say, as the life continues in the bodies of the living organisms, so after some time, after this aging process, what happens is different organs and tissues of the body start degrading, and the functioning of the body, it starts becoming slow, and eventually when this organ system or the functioning of the body stops, that results in the death of the organism. So after this birth, growth, and this aging, the final answer is going to be the death of the organism. So as the life continues, the organ system begins to lose its effective functioning. Organ system begins to lose its effective functioning, and might stop, which results in the death of the organism. So when an organism is born, after the growth process, aging, and finally death is seen of the organism. Now also in living organisms, the last characteristic property in living organisms is this, that living organisms, they respond to various stimuli. They can respond to various stimuli which are occurring in their environment, occurring around them. They can respond to biochemical, physiological, physical, all kind of stimuli. This is due to the presence of sense organs and nervous system. It is due to the presence of sense organ and nervous system which is present in living organisms. So because of that, they can respond to various changes which are occurring in the surrounding. Also, living organisms have the ability to show movement and locomotion, that is, move from one place to another, whereas plants, they show certain kinds of movement. So these are the characteristics which are going to separate the living organisms from non-living organisms, and we can definitely identify which are living and which are non-living based on these criteria. So with this, we complete the topic on what is living and what are the characteristics of living organisms. So for more videos, please stay tuned with Study Live. Thank you.